So, Peter, why did you choose geophysics as a career, and how did you get into it?
Well, I actually chose geology to begin with, but I went into geophysics. The main reason being, those days in the UK there was no geophysical undergraduate courses. There was only master's courses. So I did my degree in geology in England at Nottingham University. I chose it because I wanted to explain natural phenomena, how things worked in the countryside where I lived in England. I just wanted to understand how the rocks developed. I was always fascinated by fossils, but I went into geophysics as my first job and loved it. So yeah, it was great fun.
And Peter, did your education prepare you well for the career?
It gave me a foundation to get moved on. I guess we did have a unit in geophysics, which I took, but the geophysics then in 1971 and 72 was mainly gravity and magnetics. It was nothing. They showed us a picture of seismic, but we never saw the seismic section. But what it did teach me was contouring, and interpretation. So those are the tools I think that I benefited from, that I was able to make use of later on. But straight geophysical skills, possibly not.
What about your high school, though?
Oh,
Did you get to do any geology or geophysics related things at high school?
Physics, chemistry, and maths was my subject. So in physics, we did all the theory of waves. So that really set me up. And of course, chemistry helped me in terms of the geology side of things. But certainly, doing physics at A level in England, same as ATAR here, was very good. We had a fantastic physics teacher, and he was able to give me all the soundings we needed to have in wave theory and electrical theory.
Well, I think that's quite important. The actual teachers in high school got you interested in sciences or not. You needed a good teacher at high school.
Yeah, we had a guy called Mr. Stevenson, and everybody wanted to take physics because we all got good marks.
So, can you give us a summary of your career path?
Yeah, well, I was offered two jobs at the end of university. One was a well site geologist with Xlog, and the other one was a seismologist with Seismograph Services Limited out of the UK. And I definitely and easily went to the SSL route, the geophysical route, because the global travel, I wasn't going to be on rigs, I was going to be working in jungles, and it was going to be a bit of fun. So, I started off there. I've never been on a plane before, and I got on a plane and went to Indonesia, and it was fantastic. And we had 1,000 people. There was 12 of us. There was 1,000 Indonesians we had to look after. We had to learn Indonesian virtually overnight. Man management was really important. So I did that. Then went to Sarawak. Then went to Brunei, doing the same things. It was great occasions, learning all the time. And then I went to Nigeria, and I'd learned an awful lot, and I became a party chief in Nigeria after 2.5 years in the company. And it was great. I did that whole thing there for 5 years, and then I decided I probably need to settle down. So there's an advert in the paper in the UK, and British Gas wanted a geophysicist. So I applied, and luckily the exploration manager who gave me the job, he was ex-SSL and liked people who knew geophysics and did all that, so he gave me the job, and I was an operations geophysicist and an interpreter for the Northern England part. So it was really good. I learned an awful lot from my exploration manager at the time, Peter Thompson. And then I did 3 years there, and Maggie Thatcher sold off British Gas, all assets, and there was 2 adverts in the paper to go to Australia, one for BHP Petroleum and one for Woodside. And I'd never heard of Perth, so I'd heard of Melbourne, applied for the job.
Sorry, was it BHP Petroleum or Hematite?
Hematite Petroleum, yeah. It was Hematite Petroleum. Yeah. They changed their name after about a year, but I joined them, and I was never interviewed for the job. They just, because I was on a seismic boat at the time, and they gave me the job. It was great. Just came to Australia. I was given a responsible job. The first well of mine that got drilled was Jabiru, and they made me an exploration manager after that for some unknown reason. So my geophysical skills in BHP lasted 2.5 years, and I became an exploration manager. But I still love geophysics, and at that time in Melbourne we had ourselves, Exxon, Shell and BP, and basically the centre of oil and gas was Melbourne. And so all the seismic contractors wanted to come to Melbourne. I met Mick when I went to Melbourne. After about a year, we joined the ASEG. We ran conferences together. Then BHP sent me various places around the world. It was fantastic. Myanmar, Yemen, UK. I came back, and it wasn't the same company when I came back. We met when we were there then, of course. And Woodside offered me a job as the exploration manager for Northern Australia. So I did that, and it was the Laminaria Corallina days. Then they put me in charge of international exploration for their first manager there. It was a great time. Did 17.5 years in Woodside, but I've always loved geophysics. I've always liked shooting seismic, interpreting seismic, and dealing with seismic people. You know, there's a camaraderie that comes around, and the technologies that I've seen in advancing from 1974 through the 80s, 90s, 2000, it's been fantastic. I mean, it's spectacular what's happened.
And Peter, what were your important milestones?
It's a bit like making ways that you remember all your discoveries, and they're always a good milestone. But you know, starting off and going to see different places, getting paid to go and to see all these different places around the world, and you meet actually really nice people who've got common things with you, and that's why you have the camaraderie that Mike was talking about. But sometimes you also remember your the failures, and the failures can be good milestones as well, because you have to think hard about what went wrong.
I never had to do that.
We found Jabiru, and I was the senior geophysicist who found it, and it came in exactly on prognosis, but I got the pick wrong and the velocity wrong. So, but it came in right.
But they cancelled each other out.
Yeah. So you get strokes of luck like that, and you know you're dying out on it as well. So things like that. Corallina, when I first went to Woodside, but I guess the biggest milestone was when I was asked to take Woodside overseas, and that was fantastic. Just putting an international strategy together, and then going to wild and wacky places, shooting new seismic where it had never been before, and uncovering new basins. So there's things like that that give you a little bit of oomph, and the people you work with. I mean, we're pretty blessed with the people that we've worked with over time, and you know, and technology's advanced so much. It's not as though you're doing you're a historian where you're just reading a book and this happening. You start off, and you know, when I started shooting seismic in '74, nobody would even think about that now. It's transgressed, and the quality is so good. So every time we hit an oil price crash or something doesn't work, as an industry, in geophysics especially, we've actually learnt and transgressed and gone to the next stage. So I think those are the big milestones where technology breakthroughs have really advanced and reduced our risk.
Can you tell us about some of your most enjoyable jobs?
Most of the time, I've had great time. So yeah. But there are some outstanding things that have happened. You know, one of the first ones is on a seismic crew, and we set a record production. And our client in Indonesia at the time was Philips, and he was so happy with us. He sent us cartons of beer, and it was Christmas time, so he sent us 2 turkeys for us to have at Christmas. So we gave them to our cook.
Was that halal?
No, well, I don't know. And so he sent us these 2 turkeys, and we gave them to the cook, and he curried them for Christmas lunch. So these things happen.
Pretty nice.
But you know, oil discoveries are still the most important things. We made a discovery in Mauritania with Woodside. It was a really good discovery, and the logs came in and they looked really good. We had the biggest column we'd found for ages, and then when we did some tests on it. It was gas, not oil, and gas didn't really have any value there at the time. So, you know, you have your ups and you have your downs, but when that came in and we thought, oh, we've got a 180 metre oil column, it looked pretty good. But one of the highlights was some of the conferences that we organised. In Melbourne at that time, we organised quite a few conferences. We had one called the Deconvolution Conference.
That was really good.
Yeah. And that's because all the seismic contractors said they had a zero phase wavelet after deconvolution. So we gave every one of them a wavelet, a seismic trace to play with, and said, put it through your deconvolution and tell us what the phase is. And they all came back zero phase, and we plotted them all up. Every one of the 6 different contractors were different. Yeah. And they had to go back to the drawing board then to do that. But you know, some of the other things that are great was when I started shooting seismic, we had 48 traces, and we're shooting 6-fold data, and the quality wasn't that good. And then that was using a Sercel 338, and that was state-of-the-art technology. Yeah. You could put 2 of them together and you could get actually 96 traces. Then the Sercel 348 came in probably 1976, and that had 240 traces, and it was fantastic. It was just revolutionary. And of course, we've gone through the analog to digital, so everything moved a lot faster. But that made, you know, we could get up to 48-fold data, and that was fantastic how that worked. So, you know, again, as I said before, the way the technology has changed, so that we've got new things happening. And some of the experiences of meeting people, you know, going to places like Myanmar when they just come out of their first problems and they'd opened up. I was in BHP in those days, BHP Petroleum, and they gave me the job as country manager. So I had to go and set everything up. Brand new country. They were all really happy because they've got a civilian government, or not a civilian, they got a government that would welcome people. But that only lasted 2.5 years, and then they came back in again and changed. So there's a lot of things that happen, both from the technical front and also from the community or social side of things and the learning. But again, I'll still go back to the fact that I'm still overwhelmed with how technology has changed, and has given all of us who, you know, who've started with very low level data. Now it's just amazing. But I'm no whiz on the machines anymore, so all this newfangled stuff, I'm not quite as up to it as perhaps Mick is.
Read my articles.
I did. I read it this morning. I read your article with all the different colours on it. It was about for the record spectral
deconvolution.
Yeah, it was a good article. Whilst you're thinking, one of the things that I really can remember was we got a lady offshore. A woman, should I say, so my wife told me to say this, not a lady, a woman, and she was a technical assistant, and we got her on an offshore seismic boat in the mid-80s, and that was the first lady in Australia that went on a seismic boat. And she absolutely loved it, and the crew respected her and did everything. It was fantastic, but getting her offshore in the mid-80s onto a seismic boat was quite difficult. But it's great.
Well, Peter, did you have, I'm sure, certainly being in the management side of things, did you have a lot of stress?
The most stressful time I had was probably when we discovered Jabiru in 1983, and we shot a 3D seismic survey before GPS in the middle of the Timor Sea, and there was no islands nearby we could put Raycal on or anything like this. So we had to design a system to put accurate navigation for 3D. So we put 3 Siletus buoys out and left them there in the ocean, and they rotated round. It was a great piece of work, and luckily we had BHP had some fantastic surveyors, not in petroleum but in minerals, and they were fantastic. And they designed it all, but we lost one of them. Somebody came up and chopped the hawser and it disappeared. Subsequently, we found, this was a long time later, not after we'd interpreted the data and processed it, we found that it actually wasn't quite in the right place. But then, you know, once we processed the data, and I'd never processed 3D data before, It was done by GSI in Sydney at the time. It was great. And then we got a landmark. We got the first landmark processing unit that was ever made in the world, Landmark 1. And Landmark 2 went to Woodside. Yeah, so and Exxon, I think, got one. But we got the first one. And I was given the job of being the interpreter. I'm not very good with, high-level computers. And but I had to use it. It took a whole two offices combined to be in there, reel-to-reel tapes, and if you wanted to play any animations, you had to put them on tape, record them, and play them.
Yeah, it was as big as a fridge.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. But I had to learn a lot. But that was probably the most stressful because I wasn't very good on computers. And I had a couple of other stressful times with nothing to do with geophysics.
The landmarks used to be so expensive that people had to take an 8-hour shift. We had 3 8-hour shifts, and they were worked full time by the geos to make value for money.
Right. Yeah, I think it cost us very close to $1 million for this landmark system.
Yes, back in
84.
Yeah.
And that unit eventually, BHP gave it away to, I think, Curtin University or somewhere like somewhere.
Didn't it end up in the ASEG museum in
It might have done afterwards. I think it did in the end. Yeah. The other two most stressful times were nothing to do with geophysics, but it was management. So we were living in Myanmar, my wife and I, and we hadn't any kids at that time. And I was on a plane going back into Myanmar, and the plane got hijacked. And I was given the letter of ransom by the hijackers. And they took us to Dhaka in Bangladesh. And there were 2 students, and we were on the ground for 10 hours. It was a pretty stressful time, whether we get blown up or not. But because I'd done seismic, the guy who said he got a bomb around his neck, I actually, because we'd done blasting and everything, I actually understood that he hadn't got he could never detonate it. And it turned out to be soap, but it was we didn't know if the guy in the cockpit had a gun. He claimed he had a gun, but it wasn't loaded. So that was a pretty stressful time. And then the last most stressful one was we were living in Yemen with 2 young kids, and this was in BHP, and a civil war started, and we had Scud missiles all around us. We had to all move into the centre of the house, so there was no windows. And I was actually the honorary Australian consul to Yemen at the time. I'd just been made that, and we had to evacuate out, and it was crazy. We were 5 days with bombs going around, but we didn't get hurt. Went back to the UK, flew to UK. But these are the things that you do when you're in funny places. And, in our business of geology, geophysics, you do end up in a few funny places.
Yes.
We were shooting seismic in Nigeria, and we, it was all going well. And the shot hole shouldn't have been drilled where it was. It was underneath a 440 kV pipe transmission line. The wires came out, wrapped themselves around, and blew all the equipment up, and we had 4 of the local labour was sitting on the cable, and they came out and they got welts all underneath their backside. So, but safety was, we haven't mentioned it, you mentioned it, but the transition from 70s, 80s, 90s in safety is fantastic. It was shocking when I started. We just put people in back of Bedford trucks. You put 20 local labour in the back of trucks. No straps. You put them in boats, and no flotation equipment. I think that is, as well as the technology, the safety side of things is really increased well.
It has, yes.
So you think perhaps the advances in safety are one of the key advances in the industry that perhaps you've seen. What about the technological advances?
It's it's very transitional. So the advance from going to analog to digital changed things fantastic. Because when it was digital and you just had tapes, they wouldn't last long, so you had to keep cleaning them, replace them in data storage. You had masses of them. We would be sending about 8-10 boxes of tapes on a plane every week to go to a processing centre. So going from analog to digital was great. Increasing the fold of data. So this is 70s, in the 70s. Then in the 80s we got into interactive machines and shooting 3D, fantastic changes. And of course towards the end of the 80s we had GPS came in, so the accuracy on your surveying was fantastic. You could go virtually anywhere in the world. And then as you went into the 90s, we have all the derivative data that we could use. So, you know, the VPVS, amplitudes, all those started coming in the 90s. So the way the technology's changed is fantastic. I don't know where the next bit's going to happen, but you look at acquisition now, you don't have cables, you just put a little node in the ground, and the spacing between your groups, which used to be, you know, 25 meters, is now down to 5 meters.
Right.
So your resolution is going to be fantastic.
So talking about the GPS coming in the 80s and 90s, a little side story is, before the first Gulf War, everybody that was surveying knew that there was something happening, because they used to selectively degrade the signal for the public.
Yeah.
It got turned off 3 days before the Americans invaded, because they didn't have enough military grade ones, so they were just using standard ones.
Yeah, the US wouldn't give us the P code.
Yeah.
It was a P, so our accuracy was about 10 meters.
Yeah, but that's why we used offset stations. Remember?
Yeah. If you got, you could just triangulate it.
Yeah.
But then they gave us the P code, and we got down to meters of accuracy,
Right.
which is great. I guess one of the things that you think about in retrospect, I didn't at the time, is how management trusts you. I mean, with money. I mean, drilling a well, if you nominate a well, and it could be 10 million, it could be $100 million, it's your piece of work that you've done, and you've got to say that. And if it's a failure, they don't actually sack you straight away. You know, they'll go to
Just wait a month.
So whilst the industry in itself has been up and down all the time, and there's always a threat when the oil price goes down that you'll lose your job, very few people lost their job if they got their interpretation a little bit wrong. And the fact that they trust you with that amount of expenditure is I don't know any other industry that does it.
No.
Yeah, and we all make mistakes.
Well, not necessarily mistakes. You think about
interpretations.
You're doing remote sensing. You're trying to find something 3,000 meters underground. So modern day, say the Gulf of Mexico, you're drilling down to 3,000 meters in 3,000 meters of water.
With salt.
Yeah, through salt. So you're trying to find. So they can't really say, "Oh, you've done a dod job, go," because anybody that's interpreted in salt knows that all four of us here will have completely different interpretation of the same piece of data.
Yes, having said that, been a contractor for a while now, most contracts have in there a clause that can put the blame on you for drilling dry holes. So
Yeah.
there's liability clauses in there, which I usually cross out, and I'll get a letter from the management absolving me of any wrongdoing if the well comes in dry.
Yeah.
But potentially you could end up as a consultant paying for a dry hole for BHP, for instance.
Yeah, it's just so, you know, through seismic, through drilling, it's an expensive business.
It is, but the technology is expensive to develop up to that stage, where it can be freely available to everyone for a price.
So, Peter, what do you enjoy most about being a geophysicist?
All the same thing as what Mick said. It's when you usually have a team of people that you're working in, and you know, you go through the seismic acquisition, the processing, then you work with the geologist to actually put a well program together. You usually have good managers. A lot of the managers I've worked for have been really good. They've supported. So I think in the oil and gas industry, as a geophysicist or a geologist, it's the teamwork that you put together, and it's up to you to help that team out. And you've got to be honest with yourself. If you feel a little bit uneasy about something, let people know. And it's amazing how much they'll come together with you and help you in rationalising a decision. But again, the other thing that I think is really good is it's, you know, when the oil price goes down, technology always comes back to make it work. I mean, that last the oil price, what was it, when it went down in 2014 or something?
14, yeah.
The world, the world, oh, it'll never happen again. It's terrible. Yet technology came back, and we were drilling wells instead of $100 million for an offshore well. We were drilling the wells for $40 million, $50 million. And technology, geophysics came down from being phenomenally expensive to half the price. A lot of the seismic brokers didn't like that, but it came down, and they didn't all go bust. So we're pretty changeable in what we can do, technology-wise, commercially-wise, and geophysics and geology is emerging. Nothing you can say is final. And there's always new things happening that it'll reduce your risk, and I think that's commendable. The societies that we've got, like ASEG, AAPG, PISA, and all these good ones, they're a good launch pad for discussion. And I mean, the ASEG conferences we've had have been.
They're called something else now.
But when some of the older ones we had to change a couple of times. I remember one in Adelaide we had to change once. A few of the seismic contractors were
very
advertising in a different way than we would perhaps have acceptable.
Again, that's the safety in parallel to safety. That side of the things were.
And Peter, what are you doing now, and what are you planning for the future?
I'm semi-retired, but I still do work for a coal bed methane project in Botswana that I really enjoy looking after, and we've just actually shot some not seismic. We just shot some tensor gravity and magnetics, because there's a lot of dolerite sills out there. So I'm learning a few things about gravity and magnetics that I haven't done before. But I spend quite a bit of time now working with societies, and I love going out. I spent quite a bit of time before COVID going to Indonesia, around the universities, talking to the kids, giving them encouragement. I've been helping out on a mentoring program here with some of the joint societies, and I've been quite active in the AAPG going through. I still read all the geophysical and geological magazines, Preview and Leading Edge and all those good things.
That's good.
So I haven't stopped, I haven't cancelled any of those, and I enjoy reading them. So, and I spend a bit of time now looking at what's going on in the geophysics and geology of the Mars and Moon projects. I think that's fascinating what they're doing. So, yep, I think I'm probably a better geoscientist now than I was when I was 30 years old, because I understand things a bit better. And I can read more now. I've got more time to read. I'm probably a lot worse on machines than I was, but and I want to spend more time mentoring, youngsters and telling them. And we've had a great industry. I mean, we've had a great time, great career, and we've got to pass that back on to the youngsters who are struggling to get jobs, and we've got to give them encouragement, because if we don't have youngsters coming in, whether renewables are great, but we still need to have oil and gas till at least out to 2040, 2050.
We still need tyres for the electric cars.
Yeah, and plastic.
Yeah.
So we've got to give these people encouragement. Otherwise, the industry will just, die because there's no people.
Okay, I think that's pretty much it. We're done now. So have you just got anything you want to say to just wind things up?
No. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Maybe in the third session we can come back with something. But I'm pretty much done.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say is, when I came to Australia in '82 in BHP, they had very strong geophysics and mining, and we hardly ever got to talk to them. And through the ASEG was where we got to talk to the geoscientists, especially the geophysicists in minerals in BHP. Phil Harmison, he was a lovely guy, and we would actually we weren't allowed to talk to each other within BHP, but outside of BHP and the ASEG, we were able to talk.
Yeah,
and I think we need to do a lot more of that, because the seismic is now being shot by the minerals, but we need to learn a lot of them from them in their electrical and magnetics and gravity.
I must say, in the last few years, because I retired from BHP, you know, we did interact way more, because exactly that, because I was shooting seismic and we needed gravity and mag and a few other potential field stuff.
Yeah.
So it is happening, and it should always continue to happen. So hopefully it will.
And it's the aim of the AUGC conferences to bring together ASEG, PISA and AIG, so that we can share knowledge across the industries.
Yeah, unfortunately people tend to migrate to what they know. They don't want. I used to often go to other talks because I found them interesting, but I do note that the majority of people still want to stay in their field.
But there is some mixing.
Yeah, some, I know, and there should be more. We should try to encourage more somehow.
And I think the carbon sequestration and looking for geothermal work, etc. That's all geophysics and geology is going to be required. So we don't just think oil and gas. Think of other things as well that you can do within there. Same skill base.
Yes.
Not as much fun though, Pete.
No. Well, but it's
drilling wells for carbon dioxide sequestration.
but you've got
Doesn't really ring
the
the bell for me.
geophysics in there. You've got to image the plume. So that's going to be very interesting, because the modelling you've got to do and the monitoring, you've got to have to see how this CO2 disperses in the reservoir. So that's going to be a new area of geophysics to do.
Well,
The most unusual project I probably had was in British Gas, because we had a gas field off Morecambe Bay in the Irish Sea, and the British government asked us, because we were nationalised, and the British government asked us to look at, from a geophysical and geological point of view, could they put nuclear waste down boreholes that they would drill in the Irish Sea. So we had to do a survey and just prove to them that actually this was tectonically active, and there's no way you should be putting anything out there. And the British government listened to us, but to begin with, they were just going to put nuclear waste down there. So there's areas where geophysics will be required in the future.
That's right. Okay, I think that's it. So thanks very much. It's been quite an interesting discussion. I may have butted in a few times. Helen's been very quiet here next to me. So, but thank you very much, and we'll see what comes. We'll see what comes of this. Maybe one day Helen will be on the other side of the camera.
I'll just introduce our interviewers. Is Craig Dempsey and Helen Debenham. They're on the other side here. I'll just get their photos. Smile.
And Craig's got a lot of similar experiences to us.
Yeah. As you may have heard through the discussion. So
Was your longest employer BHP?
yeah, if I look at my employment profile, it sort of went like asymptotically like this through the employers, like 6 months, a couple of months, and then a couple of years, and then 11, 12 years at Marathon, and then 23 and a half at BHP.
You were fair about Marathon.
11.
I would have been there a long time, but I kept coming second in the job interviews, Pete. I had about 4 job interviews with BHP.
I recused myself from one of your job interviews because I said, I'm next to closer friend, I can't really sit
So
on
you'd
the
have
job
had John
interview.
Denham interviewing you.
Yeah, John Denham.
I didn't have anybody interview me.
And then Greg Smith in the next one, and then Craig was supposed to do it. Actually, it was Mark Locke, I think.
Yeah.
Interviewed me in the mid-90s, and then in the 2000s it was Craig, and someone else got the job. So I went and worked somewhere else.
But we've always worked hard and played hard. And, that's
Yes.
one thing,
Yeah.
you do go out and have fun with your successes.
Yes.
But when you put together an application for a bid round, you just worked all the hours to make sure you got it in, and it's good fun.
I know. I must say that I found that all the companies I worked for celebrated success.
Yeah.
Quite well.
Yeah.
So All right.
Alan, you work a lot in the not oil company, but the support companies. Is
Yes.
it any different? Just a view on those, because you've heard about oil companies, and I'm talking about my seismic days, but what are they like these days?
So success is not well celebrated because often we're not even told. So you might process some seismic, clients being very careful about, can we see the AVO here?
Yeah.
You do all this work and then
We
they
don't
disappear
tell you.
off.
Yeah.
And presumably they book a rig, they go and drill things, but unless you're actually keeping your ear to the ground to find out what's happening, nobody actually comes back and says, we drilled on that seismic and it was great. Nobody tells you that. I'm still waiting to get one of those little paperweights with a blob of oil in.
They don't do them anymore because that's health and safety.
Don't they?
No.
They can't do it. Can't
Well, maybe I'll never get my blob of
Because
oil then.
I used to have little bottles.
I've
still
still
got
got
bottles of
some.
it.
I've got a bottle of Jabiru
Little
oil and
glass
some
stoppers.
Northwest Shelf ones.
I've got
I'm-
a chalice, and I've
Yeah.
got.
I'm waiting for the little gift that comes that says, we couldn't have done it without the seismic you worked on.
Oh,
I think I'll be waiting my entire career.
I took, when GSI completed the 3D seismic, I took their crew, their processing crew out, and I took them out, and we spent a lot of money, and we drank a lot of beer or wine. Can't remember which. Jim
Probably-
McRae, remember Jim McRae?
Yes, Jim,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so he was an interesting character.
Yeah. Well, should we wind up? Okay, thank you very much, folks. And I
Thank
think
you.
it's time for us to go and have a
Top.
libation.
What does the adjudicator think?